creeping things and the beasts of the earth after his kind. And it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth after his kind, and the cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and all the earth, and over the creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. So God created man in his image. In the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. And God blessed them and said unto them, be fruitful, multiply, replenish the earth, subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. I think that's kind of neat. Adam and Eve, they don't give their name here, but they were the first people to see everything happening here on earth. And if you go to chapter 2, is actually this was like an overview. This is the breakdown in chapter 2 and what actually happened. And when you, verse 7, starting in verse 7 of chapter 2, and the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground, and breathed life into the nostrils, the breath of life, and man became a living soul. Adam was created by God. I think it's kind of neat because when you look at it, the Lord formed man from the dust. He did this personally. All the creatures, he said, bring them forth. They came out of the sea. So God took a certain interest in us because he made us specifically for a job to do. But then we go over to verse 15. And the Lord God took man and put him in a garden of Eden, to dress it and to keep it. And the Lord God commanded him, saying, of every tree of the garden thou mayest eat freely eat, but of the tree of knowledge of good and evil thou shalt not eat of. For in the day that thou eatest, therefore thou shalt surely die. And the Lord said, it is not good for man should be alone. I will make him a helpmate meet for him. And out of the ground the Lord formed every beast of the field, every fowl of the air, and brought them to Adam to see what he would call them. And whatsoever Adam called them, every living creature, that was the name thereof. And here Adam was actually blessed to see every creature created and got to name them. I think that's pretty neat. He was there. He was blessed to be there. And go on and read verse 20. And Adam gave names to all the cattle, and to the fowl of the air, and every beast of the field. But Adam, there was not found a helpmate for him. And the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon Adam, and he slept. And he took one of his ribs, and closed up the flesh instead thereof, and the rib which the Lord God had taken from man, he made woman, and brought her unto the man. And Adam said, this is bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man. Therefore shall a man leave his father and mother, and shall cleave to his wife, and they shall be one flesh. And they were both naked, the man and his wife, and were not ashamed. Here Adam actually got to see the first woman, and it was created out of him. And I think it's kind of neat that he knew about fathers and mothers. And even though he had never had one, he knew how life was going to be. And he actually, he was blessed to be at that time in that place. And it could have been anybody. But God chose them to start the world. And I just think it's neat that God's put everybody in a certain place and at a certain time. And it's been encouraging for me to look at this, the different people and all in the Bible that God's put where they are, and put us here to see the things of this world and what's going on in it. And to me, it's encouraging to look out there and you see all of it falling apart, and I have comfort in watching it fall apart because I know this is how it's going to be. And I know when it's all said and done where I'm going to be. And I know that God has got control of it. And I kind of want to go there, continue going on. In Genesis chapter 3, everybody knows this story, but it's kind of neat when you look at it is God's still in control. And He's blessed everything just the way it is. And starting chapter 3 in Genesis in verse 1, now the serpent was the most subtle, was the more subtle of any beast of the field which the Lord God made. And he said unto the woman, Yea, hath God said, Ye should not eat of every tree of the garden? And the woman said unto the serpent, We may eat of the fruit of the tree of garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, Ye shall not eat of it, neither shall they touch it, lest you die. And the serpent said unto the woman, Ye shall not surely die, for God doth know that in the day that ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as God, knowing good and evil. And the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and the tree to be desired to make one wise. And she took of the fruit thereof, and did eat, and gave it unto her husband with her, and he did eat. And their eyes of them both were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together to make themselves aprons. I just want to stop right here for a minute. I think it's kind of neat. Here's Adam and Eve here in the garden, and the serpent comes and talks to her. We always have, the fall has always been brought, but Adam and Eve were the only humans that ever talked to an animal. I think they talked to animals on a regular basis, because here it wasn't strange for this serpent to be talking to her. I don't know, I may be wrong, but it kind of makes me think, because they had a perfect situation. Everything they did was perfect. Their lives were perfect. They knew no sin. They were in perfect harmony with nature and with God. And I think that's, and when she took and they ate, their world got turned upside down, turned around totally. Just like our world today gets turned upside down, turned around. Things happen from one minute to the next. We never know what's going to happen in our lives. And here, that's what happened to them. Their perfect situation, or I don't know how to put it, but their perfect harmony with God was gone. And they knew it. And they knew that they were naked. Something was wrong. They knew more than what they, and there was no turning back from this point. In verse 8, and they heard the voice of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of the day, and Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord God amongst the trees of the garden. Isn't that just like us when we were lost? We didn't want to go to church. I didn't. I didn't want to have no part in God in anything. So I hid myself as much as I could. Even though I didn't have the privilege of staying home, my parents brought me to church. And and go on reading here. And the Lord God called Adam and said unto him, Where art thou? He knew exactly where he was, but he asked. And he said, I heard thy voice in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, and I hid myself. And he said, Who told thee that thou was naked? Hast thou eaten of the tree thereof? I commanded thee that thou shouldest not eat. And the man said, The woman who thou givest to me to be with me, she gave me of the tree, and I did eat. You know, God knew exactly what was going on, and he asked, and like us, we blamed somebody else for what happened. And then in verse 13, and the Lord God said unto the woman, What is this that thou hast done? And the woman said, The serpent beguiled me, and I did eat. So she blamed somebody else, just like we do. I think this is neat. God asked Adam, and he asked Eve a question. But verse 14, everything changes. And the Lord said unto the serpent, Because thou hast done. He didn't ask the serpent why he did it. And the serpent was was demon possessed at this time. The devil had possessed him. He didn't ask the serpent any questions. He just said, Because thou hast done this, thou art cursed above all cattle and every beast of the field. Upon thy belly thou shalt go, and dust thou shalt eat all the days of thy life. And I never thought English was important to know what punctuation is, but that doesn't stop there. That's a semicolon. I think a semicolon, what it's called. But I think this is, verse 14 is talking to the serpent. In verse 15, he's talking to Satan. And I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed, and it shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. The word enmity here, and I had to look that up, that means hatred. I will put hatred between thee and the woman. I don't think this is talking to the serpent, even though I know a lot of people that like snakes, but I don't like them at all. So to me, I have a hatred for snakes. But I think, and it goes on, between thy seed and her seed, I think this is where he's talking about Christ coming. The future seed is God, is Jesus. And I'm not sure about all that verse, but I know that thy seed, talking about the serpent or Satan, his seed being him, there's a hatred between man and Satan. But we'll go on. And unto the woman he said, I will greatly multiply thy sorrow and thy conception. In sorrow thou shalt bring forth children, and thy desire shall be to thy husband, and he shall rule over thee. And Adam And he said, and unto Adam he said, because thou hast hearkened unto the voice of thy wife, and hast eaten of the tree which I commanded thee, saying, thou shalt not eat thereof. Cursed is the ground for thy sake, and in sorrow shalt thou eat all the days of thy life. Thorns also and thistles shall bring forth to thee, and thou shalt eat the herbs of the field in sweat, and in the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat bread until thou returnest to the ground, for out of it was thou taken, for dust art thou, and dust shalt thou return. I'm going to stop right there. But I want to look at this again in another way, that I think once the serpent seen Adam and Eve take the bite, and they were changed in an instant, I could just see the devil going, I got him. I've ruined everything. His perfect creation is now marred. And the more I thought about this, it was very, the Satan thought he has beaten God. He got kicked out of heaven because he wanted to be in control. But here, when God came walking in the garden, and he was looking for Adam, and Adam's world is now turned upside down, and the Satan knew he had him. I think it's kind of neat. All God done was ask questions. Then he laid the curse on them. Because God was so in control, he already had all this planned out. He knew what was going to happen. He knew from the very day one when he said, let there be earth. He knew what was going on. God was so in control, the devil thought he had made, because he doesn't know what's going on. But right then, when that devil, I think it's kind of neat when you look at this series, the questions, a question, then the curse. Satan was cursed at the same time. He was already cursed because he defied God, wanting to be bigger than God. But Adam and Eve were right there to see it too. And as God's plan was, he already had a plan already in motion, that even though he knew Adam and Eve were failing, were going to fail, he knew that in the future the woman was going to bring forth a seed. And I didn't get as far as I wanted, but I want to go ahead and go to Revelation chapter 12. Just kind of get started for next week. But Revelation chapter 12. Revelation chapter 12 and starting in verse 1. To me, this is where Genesis chapter 3 was. This is looking to this point. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon upon her feet, and upon her head with a crown of 12 stars. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth and pain to be delivered. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, 7 crowns upon his head, and his tail drew a third part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to deliver, to devour her child as soon as it was born. And she brought forth a young child, who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. And her child was caught up unto God, to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she hath a place provided of God. And they fed her there 1,260 days. I think this was the plan. I believe it's the plan that God had already set forth in Genesis, because this is Mary. This is when Christ was born. And the devil thought he got something. He got somewhere, but he didn't get anywhere. But I'm going to go on in next week into the birth of Christ and how some things worked out, where Mary was just chosen and Joseph were chosen by God for that time frame. And I believe everybody is chosen by God for a certain work, and we're here for a certain time, for a certain reason. And I think that we ought to look at what how God's going to use us. And each one of us have gone through some difficult times in our life, and I believe that God puts things in our life to be a help to others. And if you look at the bad things that you have that happen in your life, and you dwell on those bad times, and they're just terrible, it's just going to get you down. But if you look at, okay, God, what have I got to learn in this? And you use it to look to people and help others with what you went through, and use it. This is a blessing that God has given me, put me where I'm at, to be a blessing and a help to somebody else. And if you look at it, if you look at it that way, it's not quite as bad as what you're going through. And when you can encourage somebody else that's going through what you've been through or going through, it's encouragement to you and a help. And we know that God is in control. Even when we look out there in this world and how crazy it is, God's still in control. And I have to tell myself that every day, a lot, that I know how this world is supposed to end. The devil doesn't win in the end. We know that God wins. And which side are you on? If you're not on the right side, you need to change. You just need to believe that Christ is the one. And we'll go into that next time as we go into the birth of Christ and how things were set in motion. And it's really neat to see. And there's things that I've never thought of that I've seen and I continue to study this. But I hope it's been encouragement that God's blessed us to be where we are today, to see what's going on, and we need to rejoice that it's not going to be long. He's going to be coming back. And we need to be ready. And for me, I'm talking more to me, we need to be out there witnessing. And I think that's what's nice is being able to be on YouTube, that, they may not ever come to services, but you never know who might just happen to see that video. And as long as we're able to put stuff out there, we ought to, because it can be even encouragement to people who can't come. But hopefully it's been a blessing to you. It has been for me to study and look at, and we'll continue on next week with this. Brother Tim, can you dismiss?